the economic recession is hurting all forms of shipping. How do you think this might affect ship safety?
Well, if ship safety has a budget, and I think it does, one of the things that we're going to see is less available money on safety management programs, which involve auditing of procedures, training of crew, because the human element is very important. I think repair schedules in terms of maintenance of ships, depending on the kind of ship, are going to be affected in many parts of the world, including the coastwise trade. And we're going to see some serious questions arise. One of the problems that has not been addressed is how much money the regulators have for establishing strong safety programs, for example, port state control. The Coast Guard is seeing its budget reduced in real terms year by year. What the Coast Guard is going to do, what the flag states are going to do, what the classification societies in what is going to be a challenging and competitive environment, what they're going to do if this recession lasts, as it seems to be lasting, is a matter of conjecture. But I think that we're in for some very rough sledding on safety and management issues. I think some ships are probably going to be laid up. A lot probably are going to end up in the less highly regulated trades, for example, South Asia. One area where port state control is very strong, for example, is Australia, traditionally. Will bulk shipments of iron ore from Australia be affected by a deterioration in standards if they come up against Australian port state control? I think they will. I don't think the U.S. is going to take very kindly to ships coming into port that do not have valid certificates of financial responsibility, in the case of tankers. The Marshall Islands fleet has an average age of 8.5 years. The Panamanian fleet has an average age of about 17. Ships, as they get older, are more prone to maintenance problems, machinery problems, sometimes crewing problems. One of the things that has not been understood is that modern ships are more complicated to operate. The training of crew is going to be a very big cost item. One of the problems that we are now seeing with the expansion of Annex 6, for example, of MARPOL to cover ECAs, in other words, environment.
ECAs.
ECAs, in other words, such as we have in the Western, in fact, all of the United States now, which will be emissions control areas, is what ECA stands for. Are the expenses of meeting the new environmental requirements of Annex 6 of MARPOL going to be met? Among other things, this is going to, and we're seeing it already, require more expensive bunkers, more expensive fuel. Again, in a very challenging environmental, in a challenging economy, can the industry handle these expenses? I think the answer is we can handle a lot of them, but something's going to have to give somewhere if the recession is a lasting one, as I think it will be. And that is probably going to come on crew costs, it's going to come on maintenance schedules, it's going to come on the kinds of things that are not easy for us to monitor until something goes wrong. And that's what concerns us.
How well equipped is the industry financially to handle a major disaster or a series of major disasters?
Well, if you're talking about the oil majors, it's well equipped. I think that the major oil companies like Shell and like ExxonMobil are in good shape financially and certainly can handle it, and they can prepare for it. Whether the independent tanker operator can handle it is another question. We're talking, of course, about oil spills. We always tend to think in terms of oil spills because that's a high-profile environmental and political event, as we have seen.
But there are other kind of disasters also.
But there are other kinds of disasters, and one of them, you can have serious problems with a container ship. We've seen many of examples where a container ship gets into trouble and there's a bunker spill. And what happens then? It doesn't have to be a very big one. Experience teaches us that if it's in a sensitive area, like California or Florida or New York, that 800, 900, 1,000 tons of bunkers can make a very, very big impact. And the public will not tolerate this kind of accident. We've seen this again and again. The focus of the industry is what I call the Anderson-Cooper effect. When Anderson-Cooper got down to the Deepwater Horizon blowout a year ago and started covering it on a night-by-night basis, all of a sudden everybody stood up and realized this was what the Coast Guard calls a spill of national significance, an SONS. And everybody in the White House was suddenly called to attention. Nobody in the U.S. government pays much attention to shipping until there is a major incident. Then all of a sudden, shipping is in the news.
Well, what's the solution?
I don't think there is a solution. I think that we fine-tuned the regulatory machinery. We found that there are always holes in the fence. None of us really expected a blowout of a well in the Gulf of Mexico. Everybody, and certainly the Coast Guard, certainly the Marshall Islands as a flag state, certainly the environmental community expected another tanker accident like the Exxon Valdez or the Costco Busan, which was not a tanker, actually, it was a container ship, but it was a spill. We never expected something to come out of a well being drilled. So we get taken by surprise. We don't know what the next kind of incident will be. We hope that we have the containment facilities in place, not only the booms, the dispersants, which are a very controversial method of dealing with oil spills. We were just I was in Europe last month in Sweden. They don't use dispersants. They don't believe in dispersants. They just use boom and skimmers. No chemicals. We use chemicals. We being the U.S. government, have methods of dealing with major spills which we think are effective. The problem is that when you have a major spill, the quantity of the manpower, the actual shipping that you need, the first responders, the ships that distribute the booms and try to contain the spill, are limited in number. And the media and the public and the local politicians and national politicians are very intolerant of any kind of mistake. So the bottom line is, if we have another major spill, it is very likely, in my opinion, that Congress will take a second look at the Oil Pollution Act, which we call OPA 90, which is the centerpiece of all of our oil spill legislation. OPA 90 was drafted and enacted after the Exxon Valdez spill. It actually went into effect in 1991, but it was intended as a preventative measure, something that would prevent spills from happening. And it has been very successful. The number of spills that we get from vessels has gone way down, and not only here, but throughout the globe. The problem that we have is that a lot of the oil contamination that's in our seas and oceans is coming from land-based sources, like automobiles. That is much more difficult to address, and it doesn't attract attention because it's invisible. But what is visible is the collision, the oil spill at sea, that kind of thing.